Hello and welcome back to Dear Jordan. This is a space where I slow down long enough to put words to the lessons life teaches us quietly. Today's letter is about loyalty, not the kind people promise, the kind people live. Because one of the most confusing things about relationships is the assumption that loyalty is something two people guarantee to each other. But life has a way of teaching you something different. Loyalty is not something you can enforce, it's not something you can monitor, and it's definitely not something you can earn by loving someone harder. Loyalty is a personal standard. It lives inside someone's character long enough before they ever meet you. And that's a difficult truth to learn, especially when you've been hurt. Because when someone betrays you, your mind immediately goes searching for explanations. You wonder if you missed something, if you trusted too easily, if you should have noticed the signs. But sometimes the truth is much simpler than the explanations we create. Sometimes the truth is simply that someone lacked the character to protect what they were given. The Bible speaks about this kind of character in a quiet but powerful way. In Luke chapter 16, verse 10, it says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." In other words, loyalty is not situational. It's structural. It builds into who someone is. Which means someone who is loyal when it is easy will likely remain loyal when it is hard. And when someone who breaks trust when temptation appears was never truly protecting the relationship in the first place. That realization can be painful, but it also can be freeing because it reminds us of something important. Someone else's betrayal does not mean you failed. It means they did. So today's letter is about something I hope you carry with you long before you ever need it. It's about why loyalty is not something you demand from others. It's something you decide for yourself. So grab yourself a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's dive in. Dear Jordan, is it ever okay to cheat on someone? The short answer, and the only honest answer, is no. You will meet people who try to soften that truth. They will say it depends on the situation, on the emotions involved, on the pain they've experienced, on the complexity of the relationship, or on whatever society happens to be normalizing that year. But Jordan, most of those explanations are nothing more than guilt trying to sound intelligent. Cheating is betrayal, no matter how dressed up the reasoning is. It doesn't matter if it happens in romantic relationships, friendships, business partnerships, or within families. Wherever trust exists, cheating poisons it. And betrayal always leaves behind the same three things: broken trust, emotional damage, and a fracture in the betrayer's character. That's the part people rarely talk about. Because when people discuss cheating, they often focus on the damage it causes to the relationship. But cheating also damages the person doing it. Integrity is not something you lose all at once. It erodes slowly, choice by choice. And every time someone violates their own values, a small fracture forms in their sense of self. Over time, those fractures accumulate. That is why people who cheat repeatedly often become skilled at rationalizing it. They have to. Because the human mind does not like holding the tension between who we believe we are and what we actually do. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the discomfort we feel when our actions contradict our identity. And instead of correcting the behavior, many people simply change the story they tell themselves. It didn't mean anything. It was just physical. My partner pushed me away. It just happened. But betrayal rarely just happens. It happens through a series of small permissions someone gives themselves long before the act itself. And I say all of this as someone who has been cheated on. Not once, multiple times. The kind of betrayal that shakes your self-esteem, confuses your intuition, and makes you question everything you thought you understood about love. And even then, even in my hurt, I never once sat with myself and said, let me do the same back. Not because I was some saint, but because I refused to let someone else's lack of character drag mine down with it. People sometimes assume that when someone remains faithful after betrayal, it must mean they never had opportunities to cheat. Let me tell you something honestly. Opportunities always exist. Temptation does not discriminate based on beauty, status, or circumstance. Someone will always appear at the exact moment when your defenses are lowest, when you feel lonely, unseen, angry, or exhausted. And sometimes, Jordan, there are people who are specifically drawn to individuals in relationships because convincing someone to cheat gives them a strange sense of power. The attention feels flattering. The validation feels intoxicating. And that is how the door opens. Because cheating rarely begins in the bedroom. It begins with attention, a conversation that goes a little too far, a text message that becomes more frequent, a compliment that lingers a little longer than it should. By the time the physical act happens, the emotional boundary has already been crossed. As a married woman, I was flirted with, I was approached, I was given opportunities, but I never acted on them, not once, not even when I was angry enough to scream, not even when loneliness sat on my chest like a weight. Not even when I felt invisible in the very relationship I was loyal to. Because, Jordan, I value my integrity more than momentary attention. I value my character more than revenge. I value my future self more than someone else's bad choices. I wanted to remain the woman I had spent years shaping, a woman who sleeps with a clear conscience. A woman who does not need validation from the shadows. A woman who understands that loyalty reflects her character, not the character of the person she is loyal to. Ironically, though, even while I remained loyal, their cheating kept me awake at night anyway, worrying, wondering, trying to fix something that was never mine to fix, trying to hold together something that had already started falling apart. It is a painful place to live. Loving someone who does not protect you in return. And there is something important I want you to understand about cheating that people rarely discuss. It creates psychological injury. When someone you trust betrays you, it triggers what psychologists call betrayal trauma. The person who was supposed to be your safe place becomes the source of your pain. Your brain struggles to reconcile that contradiction. The attachment system in your brain, the part responsible for trust, connection, and emotional security, becomes destabilized. That is why people who are betrayed often begin asking themselves questions like, why didn't I see that? Was I not enough? Did I miss something? Is something wrong with me? But the truth is, cheating has very little to do with the worth of the person who was betrayed, and almost everything to do with the emotional maturity or immaturity of the person who betrayed them. People cheat for many reasons. They lack emotional discipline, they want escape without accountability, they crave attention more than commitment, they avoid hard conversations, they struggle with boredom and discomfort, they want validation without responsibility, they desire intimacy but fear the vulnerability that real intimacy requires. And here is another uncomfortable truth. Research in psychology and sociology has observed that men and women often cheat for different reasons. Many men describe infidelity as impulsive, something physical that they claim did not mean anything emotionally. Women, on the other hand, often report that emotional dissatisfaction preceded their infidelity. But here is the problem with both explanations. Regardless of the motivation, the act itself opens a door that cannot easily be closed. Once intimacy, emotional or physical, is shared with someone outside the relationship, a third presence enters what was supposed to be a space between two people. That presence does not simply disappear. Memories remain, comparisons form, emotional attachments can linger. The brain encodes those experiences. And sometimes the person who cheated may even believe they can return to the relationship and close the door again. But psychologically, that door rarely closes the way it once did. Trust has been altered, security has been disrupted, the innocence of the relationship is gone. That is why Scripture speaks so seriously about fidelity. In Proverbs 6, verse 32, it says, "He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself." Notice something important in that verse. It does not say adultery destroys the marriage. It says it destroys the person committing it, because betrayal fractures the soul long before it fractures the relationship. And in Matthew chapter 5, verse 28, Jesus goes even deeper. He says that even looking with lust in your heart is already adultery. Why would he say something that extreme? Because he understood something about human nature. The heart opens doors long before the body walks through them. Cheating begins internally with desire, attention, fantasy, and secrecy. By the time it becomes physical, the boundary has already been broken in the heart. That is why guarding your character matters so much. Because when you guard your character, you guard your peace. And when someone cheats on you, the pain can change you in ways you don't fully understand at first. You may begin to trust slower, observe more carefully, forgive more cautiously, detach faster, question deeper. And while those changes can feel heavy, they also sharpen your discernment. Because betrayal, as painful as it is, becomes a strange kind of teacher. It teaches you what real love is not. You learn that someone who loves you does not confuse you. Real loyalty does not require surveillance. Love does not need explanations that sound like excuses. Commitment is not selective. Honesty is not conditional. Someone who values you does not gamble with you. Betrayal can break your heart, but it can also build a wiser version of you. One who sees clearly, one who recognizes red flags faster, one who refuses to negotiate with half-truths. So the first lesson is simple. You never cheat. Not because the other person deserves loyalty, but because you deserve to know that you stay true to yourself. You protect your integrity. You honor your faith. You protect the woman you are becoming. You remain loyal because loyalty aligns with the woman God crafted you to be, not the woman pain might try to turn you into. And the second lesson is just as important. If someone cheats on you, you do not internalize it. You do not question your worth. You do not compete with the other person. You do not ask for what you lacked. You do not try to win back someone who gambled with your heart. Instead, you stand up. You protect your dignity. You hold your boundaries. You walk toward healing instead of humiliation, because you never let someone's betrayal convince you to betray yourself, ever. If you take nothing else from this letter, take this. Loyalty is a personal standard, not a shared guarantee. You stay loyal because it reflects who you are. And if someone cheats on you, you walk away not because you are weak, but because you are wise. You were not created to accept half love, half honesty, or half commitment. You deserve a love that stays, a love that protects, a love that chooses you without needing an audience or an escape route. And the right person, the one God aligns for you, will never put you in a position where you have to question your worth or sanity. I say this with all the love I'm still learning how to give. Your mom. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dear Jordan. Loyalty is often treated like something two people promise each other, but life eventually teaches you something a little different. Loyalty is a personal standard, not a shared guarantee. You cannot control someone else's character. You can only decide what kind of person you will be when life tests yours. And those tests will come. People will disappoint you. People will break your trust. People will sometimes betray the very love you offered them honestly. But their choices do not have to change who you are. Because every time you act in alignment with your values, you strengthen your character. And every time you refuse to become bitter, vengeful, or dishonest in response to someone else's actions, you protect something far more important than the relationship you lost. You protect yourself. So if you take anything from today's letter, let it be this. Loyalty isn't something you demand from others. It is something you decide for yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to follow the show on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. It helps this little corner of the internet grow and reach more people who might need these conversations too. And if something in today's letter hit close to home and you feel like talking it through with someone who understands the emotional side of these experiences, you can always find my coaching services in the show notes. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon. This has been Dear Jordan, Letters to My Daughter.